Hello and welcome to NewBlue FX Tips and Techniques. I'm Marcus Johnson with NewBlue. Today we're going to be taking a look at NewBlue's Light Blends collection. Light Blends contains 10 exciting transitions that create everything from rays of light to a misaligned picture to a copy machine, as well as some things that are a little more unusual. In this tutorial, we'll be looking at a selection of the Light Blends transitions, learning the controls, and providing you with a good starting point to explore the transitions on your own. Let's start with a Light Bender transition. Light Bender transitions between two clips, creating shifting, curved light flares that radiate from the highlights of your image. Like all NewBlue effects, Light Bender includes a number of presets, and there's a good chance that one of these will do exactly what you want. However, for this example, I'm going to select Reset to None and will build the effect from scratch. Now I'm going to change my position on the timeline in my editing software to be just before the halfway point of the transition, because this will make it easier to see the effect that we're creating. Now if you've used any of the plugins from our Light Effects collection, then a lot of the controls will look familiar to you. We're going to start by selecting a light source, which will define where our light flares originate from. You can choose a color from the color palette, but most likely you'll want to use the eyedropper and pick a color directly from your video. Next up is the sensitivity control. This sets how much of the image is used as a light source. If you set sensitivity all the way to 100, then the entire image will be used as a light source. The effects of the sensitivity control won't be obvious at this point, so we'll go ahead and set it to 50 for right now, and we can come back and tweak it later. Next up is the light color. This sets the color tint that will be given to the light flares. You can choose any color that you want for your light, but I'm going to stick to white for this example. Blend controls how much of the color that you've selected gets mixed into the light flares. However, as I turn up Blend, you'll see that nothing's happening. We have to come down and turn up the light control before we can see any effect. So we'll leave light at 50 for the time being. Now we've got our light, but there's not a whole lot of bending going on. It looks like we've just painted a whitewash over the video. As we increase the blur control, you'll start to see the light blend into your image more, and the light streaks that characterize Light Bender will become more visible. I'm going to turn blur all the way up to 100 so you can really see what it's doing. Now we can go back and tweak the sensitivity and light controls, and you'll see as I turn them up that the light is bending more and the image is getting more blurry. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Now let's take a look at how our transition looks at this point. I think it's looking pretty good so far, but I want to add a little more movement to the light flares, and I don't like how it just cuts between scenes. The skew control sets up the initial angle of the light flares. If I increase the skew control, you'll see the flares start to move clockwise. And if I lower skew, you'll see the flares move in the opposite direction. I think -50 looks pretty good. The rotation control adjusts the direction that the light flares move in and how fast they move. At either end of the spectrum, the light flares will be moving very quickly, and at 0 they won't be moving at all. Let's go with a value of 25. Liquefy makes the image look like it's melting, and you can achieve some pretty interesting looks with this control, but for this demonstration, I'm just going to leave it set to 0. Tempo sets how quickly the transition changes the image. I'm going to turn it up to 50 so that the light flares start a little more quickly. Finally, Crossfade sets the length of the dissolve between your two shots. Right now, we've got Crossfade set at 0 and the shots don't blend together at all. To me, this looks too abrupt, so I'm going to set Crossfade to 25 to make the transition smoother. Now let's take a look at our final result. Personally, I think that looks pretty cool. By playing around with the controls, you can create a more subtle transition or something that's really wild. It's all up to you. Now Light Bender can create some really awesome transitions, but it does take a few minutes to get all the controls set up the way that you want. What if you want something quick and easy, but that still has a really nice polished look to it? Well, Light Ring might be the answer for you. Light Ring is a really straightforward effect. With all of the control values set to 0, you can see how Light Ring works. A small circle starts in the center of the frame and gets larger, revealing the next shot. If we check the reverse box, you can see that the opposite happens. A large circle starts outside the frame and shrinks to a tiny spot in the center. So that gives you the basic idea, but right now it doesn't look very interesting. So I'll turn off the reverse option and we'll get started. Let's start by adjusting the width control. At the moment we've got a circle with a very sharply defined edge, but as I turn up the width control you'll see that the edge of our circle starts to blur and spread out. I think a value of about 25 will work well for this example. Next up is the shape control. When this is set to 0, you'll get a circle, like we have now. If I turn up the shape control, a ring starts to get thinner and taller. And if I turn down the shape control, a ring will get shorter and wider. I want to stick with a circle, so we'll just leave shape set at 0. Like its name implies, center controls where the center of your ring will be. If I wanted, I could move our ring to the upper left corner of the image and have it wipe out that way. For this example, I'm just going to leave it in the center of the image. Next, I'm going to choose a color for my light ring. I'm going with a nice dark orange because I want something that'll look a little bit like fire. Okay, I've chosen my color, but why hasn't anything changed with the light ring? Well, you have to turn up the glow control before the color will start to blend in. Finally, liquefy adds watery ripples around your light ring. I think it's a pretty cool effect with this transition, so I'm going to set liquefy to 50. And here's our finished effect. You know, for about 2 minutes worth of work, I think that looks really great. Now let's take a minute to look at a transition that's really unique. Neon lights highlights the edges of your video and makes it look like a glowing neon sign. Alright, I've added neon lights to our clips and reset the controls. And at the moment, as you can see, it's a bit messy. The first thing that we want to do is set up how much of the image is outlined. And to make that easier to see, I'm going to turn the picture control down to 0. Picture controls how much of the original image is mixed in behind the neon outline. Okay, now we can see our outline more clearly. As I turn up the contrast control, you'll notice that a lot of the smaller lines are fading away, and we're left with the most prominent, sharply defined edges. So contrast is removing the background noise, so to speak. Once we've got contrast set where we want it to be, we can turn up the density control to fill in some of the gaps in the outline. So right now we have a pretty sharply defined outline. As I increase the blur control, you'll see that the outline softens and spreads out, as well as starting to glow a little bit more. Next we'll want to pick a color for our neon lights. I think the aqua blue color will work well here. Now you can see that nothing's changed since we selected a new color. We'll have to increase the mix color value to start adding in our color. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. Now earlier we set the picture control to 0. This means that when we reach the center of the transition, the original video will have completely faded out from behind the neon lights. I want to keep some of the original video back there, so I'm going to turn picture back up to 50. Tempo works the same way as it did in Lightbender, and I'm going to turn it up to 50 so that our neon lights start a little more quickly. Finally, I don't want to have an abrupt cut between the images, so I'll set crossfade to 25 to give it a nice, subtle blending. And here's our finished effect. I think you'll agree that it's pretty unique and very effective. Now we've barely scratched the surface of what light blends can do. In addition to the 3 effects that we've covered today, there are another 7 exciting transitions contained in the Light Blends package, like Glow Pro, Photon Blast, and Psychostrobe. Why not check out Light Blends for yourself? Just visit us at www.newbluefx.com, where you can find out more about Light Blends and download a free trial version today. Plus, while you're there, you can check out our entire library of tips and techniques tutorials. And stay tuned, because we'll be featuring more Light Blends tutorials in the near future. This is Marcus Johnson saying thanks for watching and learning about NewBlue FX. Competitively priced, aesthetically fresh, and ridiculously easy to use.